Evening Year 11, just a quick video clip on things that I think will possibly come up and things that I think we may well have a problem with. Now, this is going to be a very quick one on the problems in Weimar, all problems or opposition to Weimar. Now, first of all, the obvious ones are biggest problem Weimar has. It's created by politicians who are known as the November criminals who signed the armistice in 1918. That's probably the biggest problem that Weimar has. It's seen as surrendering at the end of the war, which is never going to be well received in Germany. Now, probably the first thing that is a problem, well, the biggest thing really on this page, it's a problem for Weimar, is the Treaty of Versailles. Loses land, army, money, blame. You can see in the background there the stats about those different things. That's probably the biggest reason why Weimar falls apart in the end, because it's connected to all the financial crisis, in particularly 6,600 million, involves the loans, and then eventually the Wall Street crash wouldn't have had as big an impact if it wasn't for the fact that the amount of money that was put on to Germany by the Treaty of Versailles, specifically by France and by Britain and the Americans during the treaty. So that's probably the biggest one to mention. Make sure you remember that one. Now, secondary to that, the Weimar has its own problems, which can be strengths or weaknesses, but basically the structure of it, seats equals votes, very, very fair, but there's no real established parties. Like we've got Conservatives and Labour, the Germans don't really have that because they've never had democracy prior to World War I. So this new government's very, very fair, but it's also a bit confusing for German people. There's also the fact that it's got a president at the top, it's got a chancellor, and there's multiple chancellors over quite a few each year. So that's also a problem for Weimar as well. Now, the second main one, we haven't put the full ins and outs for here, but basically, we've got threats from the right and threats from the left. Now, 1919, Spartacist revolt, a communist attempt to seize power, which is put down by the Freikorps. Now, the government orders the Freikorps to put down the Spartacist revolt. Now, that's not popular because basically you are using right wing to put down left wing, and also the Spartacist leaders, Karl Liebknecht, Rosa Luxemburg, they are strangled and chucked in the river. So they get murdered by the Freikorps. It doesn't look great on behalf of the Weimar Republic. You've also got 1920, you've got the Cat Putsch, which is the Free Corps who decide to take over in Berlin. Now, this is dealt with by the workers going on strike. Again, not great for the outcome for Weimar because they haven't really solved it. They basically used the workers to put down the Cat Putsch. So by the end of 1919, you've had its own problems with its constitution. You've had the Treaty of Versailles, you've had threats from the left and threats from the right. So before we even get to 1923, things are pretty bad in Weimar. Now, 1923, you have the French invade the Ruhr because the Germans are not keeping up with the bill for Treaty of Versailles. This means that basically Germany encourages passive resistance. Now, in order to pay for passive resistance, the German government comes up with the great idea of printing more money. Money becomes worthless, which we call hyperinflation. By the end of 1923, Weimar is in a complete mess. So that's a massive problem for Weimar. It's the way, not just what happens, but the way it deals with the problems that basically happened in 1923 and the problems that happened 3 years before in 1920 and 1919. Now, also in 1923, after the problems of hyperinflation and the invasion of the Ruhr, Hitler decides he's going to take over Munich. Gets put down and sent to prison, but gets special treatment. So basically sits in prison writing his book, able to give speeches to local papers and becomes something of a celebrity. He also reorganises the Nazi party, comes up with a Hitler Youth, decides to go with the ballot and not the bullet. So basically Weimar, by the end of 1923, has done a lot of things which are basically going to sow the seeds for Hitler to seize power further down the road. Final thing to mention, biggest problem for Weimar is in 1929, so it's not on this screen. It's the Wall Street crash. Here it is. So 1929, loans from the USA, which had helped Germany's economy, the Americans want them back, and the crash happens. And if you look at these stats, they just underline quite how bad the Wall Street crash affects Weimar. Basically, no one has got a job, and people start to drift to the left and the extreme right, like the Nazis. So Wall Street crash, probably the biggest factor, but it's connected to all the other factors as well. So that is problems of Weimar in under 5 minutes. Good luck with that one.